You see, the veterans of foreign wars were about, oh shoot, at one time I think we had close to 400 members. That's a lot of people in and out of a community. And we sat together and told stories. Not service stories. I never heard one in my life, and I was too steady there. And you see, it was just a place for a bunch of guys to get together.
Yeah.
And basically, you see, those that wanted to elaborate didn't participate. They stayed home. Okay. And those of us that were that had the funny stuff and were willing to work, you see, because it took a little work too in the community to stay alive, to identify yourself.
Sure.
And you see, veterans of that age in the 40s were known for their carousing. And they were happy to be alive, and they never turned any drinks down, which was unfortunate.
Yeah.
And some of them got typed that way, you see.
Sure.
So we were fortunate. Oh yeah, we had the bar, oh yeah.
Yeah.
But no one ever got thrown out, or we had a shit list.
Yeah?
Yeah, we did. Huh. And it won't work today, but it did at the time. The clown that stood at the door half full, he says, "Beat it."
You didn't want any of that business.
No, we said, we don't want them.
No.
Send them home.
Yeah.
And the place should be, it was said that the behavior of the members should be good enough so it'd please your mother to bring her in. And that was true.
I think that's good advice.
It was very good
Even
advice.
Today
it is, you see. If you're going to go out on the town, go where you'd be proud to bring your mother.
That's great advice. Feel free to take it behind the scenes. Okay, can you tell us your full name?
John Solheim.
And when and where were you born?
Born northwest of Frankfurt in January 16, 1920.
Is that South Dakota? And what age are you currently?
What do I do currently?
What age?
101.
Nice. What was your full rank and what part of the armed services were you in?
Dog face, you see. That's the bottom of the barrel,
Yeah.
you see. And I was with the 75th Division in Belgium.
Oh. U.S. Army.
Mm-hmm.
What was your role in that unit?
Stand guard,
Yeah.
halt, take off.
Was that?
Catches 90% of what you done, you see.
Were you watching? Were you like up on watching a post or something?
We were watching the roads,
Okay.
for naughty boys.
Ah.
Suspicion.
Okay. Nice. Okay. Switching gears a little bit, can you tell me about your early childhood years?
We grew up in the 30s. And there's so much to tell about it that I had to take too long.
Well, I'll lead you through some of it. Do you have like memories of the town or area where you grew up? And playing and
in the 30s, the street, Saturdays was a busy day in those days.
Okay.
And the streets were filled with old cars and trailers. They made a trailer out of the car that they drove maybe last week that fell to pieces.
Okay.
And hauled something to town on Saturdays. Created chickens, something from the farm, which was damn thin.
Sure.
Wasn't much there.
Huh.
To raise a few, not dollars, nickels.
Okay.
When I tell people that I went to school without any money, they say it ain't true.
Yeah.
I says, to hell, it ain't true. We went through school with no money. There wasn't any money.
Right. Now, did you trade the eggs and chicken and stuff?
Our folks sold eggs and chickens and whatever, you see, cream in the stores that stayed open on the weekends.
Oh, sure.
Because they had to resell it then, you see,
Yeah.
to the people that didn't have a cow.
Sure. That makes sense.
That's simple.
Make a little money that way, I suppose.
And
A bit.
I think the butter was 35 cents a pound or something like that. You see, it was next thing, it was just a courtesy piece of money.
Yeah. What were your parents' names and what did they were farmers, I take it?
My mother and my dad both came from Vikadal, Norway. And they were damn proud of it.
Yeah.
And it was a challenging behavior. And my mother left a sister in Norway whom she lost contact with during the war years.
Oh.
And after the war, our mother received a letter from her sister.
Oh.
A valued piece of correspondence telling
bet.
her sister, my mother, that she survived, she and her family survived the king, the son of a bitches, Hitler.
Yeah. Wow.
And what they didn't have was coffee, sugar, cocoa. Now that's a strange condiment, you see, but somehow people gravitated towards cocoa, you see, and shoes. You see, you take the shoes away from people, they can't run away very far.
Yeah. Huh.
And this is what happened.
So then there was a shortage after the war of all those kind of things.
And I recall we made care packages out of those things, you see, to mail to my aunt.
Ah.
A couple years ago, I received, excuse me here, a strange call, an accent. I thought someone was playing games with me here, see, and I listened and listened, and I thought, no, they can't get an accent that good. I says, who is this? He says, it's your cousin from Norway. He made it, see, he was somewhat younger.
Huh.
And we conversed on the phone. I thought,
Nice.
phone calls, how unusual.
Yeah.
And of course, we Americans have told the Europeans we got plenty of money. Big mistake.
Yeah.
But they chided me. They say, when are you going to visit us? Well, we got too old too quick.
Yeah.
But you see, they have some strange conception of us as Americans.
Okay.
And we're not ashamed of a nickel's worth or a day of it.
They were hoping you'd bring them some money.
Well, some communication,
Products.
yeah, you know.
Yeah.
And there were people that visited there. Here's how they'd handle it.
Yeah.
They'd buy some frozen steak, put it in their luggage, and the plane went down from New York to Amsterdam. You had to change to Amsterdam to get to Norway.
Okay.
So when you got to Norway, it was evening, and the steak was just thawed out enough, you see,
right.
so they had steak dinner.
Nice. Good timing.
Strange, strange behavior, you see, who would ever believe.
Whatever
Normally you take some whiskey along,
Yeah.
because it's said that whiskey is terribly expensive. And I found that out in entertaining someone one time. They use both hands. And you see, they use it only on the birthdays and Christmas, because it's desperately expensive, you see.
Oh, sure.
So you take a jug along, and the law now says you can take along 2 or 3 duty-free. See, otherwise you pay duty, and that's tough for the carrier.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
So you could take so much along for your guest or host or family, see.
Sure. Huh. What were your parents' names?
Solheim. Now this is strange. My mother's name was the same name as my dad.
Ah.
In my time, you had to identify your mother's name to identify your Social Security account, which I done. They returned communication that says, we want your mother's maiden name. So I had a hell of a time writing it back. Now, in these countries, the family name was the name of the county you lived in or the area.
Okay.
And our mother came from one part of Solheim, which was a geographical entity. And our dad came from the other section of Solheim, which was another identity. Different people, you see, entirely. Not totally unrelated, you see.
Yeah.
But how do you tell the Internal Revenue Service that? You got a hell of a time. Some of them clowns, you know, they don't know shit from sour apples. So.
Yeah. Now, did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I got 2 daughters.
How about brothers and sisters? Did you have some?
I had a brother that passed on a couple of years ago.
Were they in the service
No.
also? Just you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was your siblings' names?
Pam, and she's unmarried, and Linda, my older daughter, Simpson, and she works out at the ethanol plant. She's
right around here.
Yeah, she's old enough to retire, but she says it's a nice job.
Yeah, keep working.
Yeah, nice people, and you know this is kind of rare in any kind of business.
Yeah.
You know, you can run into some awful assholes. You see, you just say to hell with that. You see.
Yeah.
But if there's some amiable discourse, it makes life a lot easier.
Do you remember what kind of things you would do for fun as a kid, playing games and that kind of thing?
Oh, hunting games, you see.
Oh, sure.
And shooting gophers, you see.
Okay.
Gophers were a pest. And a kid got 2 cents a tail for shooting these gophers. They thrived in the dry weather, you see. And if you could afford a .22 rifle, you was high class, you see.
Sure.
And you shot, these rifles accommodated what they called shorts, pop.
Okay.
But they were 2 boxes for a quarter, the promotion.
Oh.
And this is kind of what you used when you hunted gophers,
Okay.
see? And they let it up your rifle, which you didn't like. You had to clean it out all of a sudden, then you see it.
Yeah.
So hunting gophers was what you done. You raised a little money,
Sure.
a few nickels for the 4th of July.
You saved it up for that. What would you do with the money?
Buy firecrackers.
Okay. I thought that's what you would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was fun stuff.
Fun stuff, you see.
Yeah.
Throw them down the outhouse, you see, when there'd be someone in there, and scare the living crap out of them.
Yeah. Sounds like you had an interesting childhood. A fun one.
I'd say so, and I've recognized that with my family. I says we're fortunate to have had a good family life. And I says this is sometimes hard to come by for no particular reason. And supper time was always a good time. And we'd get kind of sick of that salt pork and white gravy, you see, and steamed potatoes, which sounds pretty good right now. And it was, supper time was family time. And same stuff easily. Never heard a squawk at the table in my life. Could have been.
Yeah.
Should have been, you see, maybe.
Did you speak in Norwegian or?
Oh yeah, you see, we when our folks had friends, they talked the native language.
Okay.
And when they talk about who was laying up with who, the kids just turned up your hearing aid, you see. And you see, you learned all the Norwegian words and the Swedish words, and you learned the works, you see. There was Lars, and who was he with? Oh, ho, 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 you see. Oh, yeah.
The stories were going around, huh?
Yeah, you see, amazing.
Can you remember listening to the Fireside chats?
Yeah,
FDR.
FDR. Oh,
On the radio, the family kind of gather around. And
you see, FDR was high profile.
Yeah.
He came after a bad time in the country, you see, and he spent taxpayers' money. Put it down. And it hasn't changed a hell of a lot. Believe that if you want it or not.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So, do you remember what that was like? You listened to it sometimes?
Well, it was enthusiasm that was it wasn't how rotten things were or how bad, because it was enthusiasm. You see, make the most of a piece of bread, basically.
Trying to lift the spirits of everybody after the Depression.
Maintain a spiritual behavior. He wasn't a preacher exactly, but
right. What high school did you go to? And do you remember?
Redfield School here.
Right in town. Do you remember what year you graduated?
1938.
There you go. Do you remember who some of your best friends were during those years?
They're all dead, of course.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember all.
Do you remember a certain buddy that you would hang out with or anything like that? Or?
Well, yes, I had a friend. I learned that he passed on here a couple of years ago.
Okay.
His name is Matheny. He helped me through school, you see, and he had his granddad's car occasionally. Big deal. And we had the Model T, which was a cranker-upper.
Nice. Now, were you involved in athletics, or were you more academic, or?
No.
Were you a good student?
No.
No, not so much.
I played in the school band poorly.
Yeah.
But you see, I stayed there.
You were there.
And the director was a taskmaster. And you better be on time, otherwise your name is low, so-and-so, he's late today, ain't he? And you had to practice, and your folks had to sign a slip that Susie practiced her horn an hour on Tuesdays. And it showed up, you see, at the practice, and he was sharp.
Yeah.
And very decent. And he influenced me, you see, to try.
Sure.
And so it was a strange experience.
What instrument did you play?
Bass, you see. And now, you see, the school band that comes down the street on homecoming.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to go inside. Sad, you see. It's sad. I had a friend that graduated from college as a music major.
Okay.
He went to McLaughlin, South Dakota as the band instructor. That's a tribal school.
Oh, okay.
And you see, the tribal people, they got a lot of interest in music. Not really. But I asked him, I said, you turn out a good one once in a while? Oh, he says, quite often. He was proud enough of his band, I suppose 3/4 tribal, easily.
Yeah.
That's tribal territory.
Okay.
He made a record. He gave it to me.
Nice.
I thought that's quite nice. He felt proud enough of his work in difficult circumstances, and he taught a lot of those youngsters how to play.
It was pretty impressive.
And he unfortunately passed on, you see, but we had a good communication with the kids, you see.
Yeah. Did your band march when you were in band?
Oh, you damn right.
More so than concerts, probably.
Oh yeah, you march. You practice in the fall every morning. It was cold. Oh yeah.
Got to march for homecoming and all that.
Yeah.
Do you remember what your first job or two was as a teenager?
I was afraid you'd ask me that. Well, I'll tell you. I've got to tell myself here, how far do I want to go into this?
Sure.
And when it looks like I'm running out of breath, just say, fine, that's just enough.
Okay.
I went to work for J.C. Penney down the street in 1938 in September. Now, a job of doing anything was scarce as hen's teeth. And the pay was bad, and the work was lots of it. And so you see, I was a hard-working farm kid, and so I got the job.
Nice.
And the people I worked with were very nice. The boss was he wasn't exactly a taskmaster, but he was very fair and very good. And it was a strange, people picked corn by hand in those days because the corn picker wasn't around yet, really, particularly. And they had double-thumbed mittens and gloves. And on weekends, they were $1 a dozen. Flannel.
Yeah.
And if you was careful, you could wear out a box in a week. Turning them over, so you turn them over and got the flan side again, the worn side over here.
Yeah.
And it was a big item. And work socks were a dime. The best work shoes were $3.98. School shoes, slippers we called them. You see, you got away from the high shoe.
Yeah.
Popular shoe was $2.98. You see, you wore them for a year going to school.
Yeah.
And he was open on Saturday nights. He swept up when you got out of there. It was midnight, you see. And it was, people paid for merchandise with coins because there wasn't many bills around.
Okay.
There were 3 bankers that were customers. In the fall, they brought their kids in for clothing, and they paid with a $20 bill. Only group of people that had a bill, and they probably put small change in the till before they left the bank, you see.
Yeah.
And overhauls. Now, the popular garment on the street in the 30s was the bib overhaul. 98 cents. And for a couple of dollars, you could dress up. You could get there was a work shoe for $2, $1.98 with a nailed sole. They weren't worth a damn, but they sold, you see. If you had $2 and didn't have any shoes, what do?
Yeah.
You buy them. And kids went into the shoe department because it was the hardest work, you see. And if you was game and you took care of all those old ladies, and feet were in bad shape.
Yeah. Because
shoes were passed down from generation to generation, usually too small.
Okay.
There was a lot of bunions, a lot of bad feet because of this behavior. But if the younger kid didn't have shoes and the older kid had a pair that was too small, she wore them. It was a simple behavior.
Oh, sure. Do you remember what your favorite kind of music was back in those days?
Pop tunes, you see, there weren't that many.
Yeah. Remember any of the musicians that you liked, or?
Oh, not really, you see. I read Louis Armstrong's autograph. A very interesting life.
Yeah.
It was so interesting, I read it twice because he was a genius, as you recall.
Yeah. And
he had a terrible problem. Booze and wild women. And it was recognized many times in the book, you see, because Louis got rid of number 1 and he's on number 2 now.
Yeah.
Talking on TV, he created voicing in the tunes. And all these people left something that was recognizable.
Yeah.
Because the musicians that follow, they say, he plays like Calloway.
Yeah.
Or he kind of plays a little bit like Armstrong. If you could, you were in pretty good shape as a musician. And Saturday, there was 4 bands in town in the 50s. And playing pop tunes in the bars.
Yeah.
And you see, life changed quickly. Papa took Mama to town so she could shop the stores.
Okay.
Mama got sick of that crap, so she says, I'd like to go in there. Papa took her to the bar, and she liked it, you see. She got a beer or whatever, and she had plenty of whatever was on the street. And the retail industry changed dramatically. And then you see and then the Mama liked to dance.
Sure.
So she danced if there was a little space to dance there. It was sociability, and Mama got treated like she should have been.
Yeah.
Instead of over the sink, she got out.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed a hell of a lot.
No.
And there was any number of people in every community that made it pretty good living playing.
Oh, okay.
And they had 4 or 5 guys that played different instruments, and it was a fun thing on evenings, usually on weekends. There was a dance or 2 or 3 or 4 in every little town. It was a happy time.
Sure.
You see, people didn't have any luxuries in the war years, and had society not stepped forward as they did, we might have still been at it.
Right.
But you see, they stepped forward, industry stepped forward, they all gave up on what they were making and started making war material. And it worked. Mm-hmm. And it was an undertaking that may never prevail again. Only the Lord knows.
Do you remember hearing about what was going on over in Europe with the Nazis and stuff before?
Oh yeah.
Or prior to our involvement?
There was. We were kids.
Yeah.
And when we worked around town, we'd come into town in the evenings, you see, to walk around.
Sure.
Carload of kids driving the old Ford. There was a German blacksmith down at the end of the street. He was a master worker. And he worked after supper, you see, pretty steady. So these kids, they'd drive by, and he'd tune in to Hitler's talk.
Oh.
At the time, all the radios in the world were tuned to Adolf. So his radio would be blaring in with the hammer there, see, and so the kids would drive by and they'd holler, Heil Hitler, you see, and he'd drop the hammer and come out looking, who's talking at us?
Yeah.
And you see, going back another century, there was a German National Bank in town. I'm getting off the subject a little here. And they met with a lot of disfavor among the people because people says they're sympathetic to the enemy. Well, if they were not, you see, it hurt business. That's not good. Mm-hmm. So they kind of closed up in the war years and kind of changed their name a little, which didn't help a hell of a lot.
People already knew who he was, probably, or who they were.
They know, oh yeah, mm-hmm. Exactly.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor attack?
Yes. I was working for the company, staying at home, and the radio, it was quiet in the house. I think my folks could see what was going to happen and what was going on. And I heard this on the radio. Pearl Harbor was bombed. And after that, it's all history.
How did that feel? How was that feeling for you at that time?
Oh, a kid, you know, he didn't know for crap, you see. You say, oh, hell. But there was a salesman that stopped in these stores. Now, corporate businesses did not have salesmen. They bought it at the market, you see, and all that happy crap, you see. But this salesman says, well, boys, he says, this is the last time I'm going to see you, because he says, we're going to be in war in a few short months. And it was true, you see. It was leading, and it's devastating.
Do you remember listening to when FDR declared war over the radio?
Yeah. I think I was home at the time. Oh yeah.
Famous speech.
When I got into trading, there was a couple guys, and this one goofy bastard, he says, I hope this war lasts a while, he says, because my dad is doing this or that. And I wanted to hit him, but I thought, I can't hit him because I'll go with the slammer, and it's bad business.
Now, what did you do in the time between when you're done with high school and before you entered the service? Was there a time period?
Oh, yeah. We pitched the 1938 crop. 1938 was the first decent crop this country experienced since the dry years, and it was pretty good for the most part. And the thresher, the owner of the mechanics, he hired a bunch of kids, you see, and I worked all summer, sun up to sundown, $2.50 a day. And if you didn't, it was early in the morning, and if it was dry enough, and it was late at night if it was dry enough. Otherwise, you
harvesting wheat.
Yeah.
At that time,
yeah. Shocking, and
oh sure.
You see,
hard work, I suppose.
Brutal work. Yeah. And I think of how hard a horse. Oh, the horse they sweat and let alone the individuals, you see.
Yeah.
And how our dad lived through it, I marvel at. I think it's amazing how this generation of people, because if you didn't indulge in brute work, your crap didn't eat.
Right.
You didn't eat.
Yeah. So, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted, yeah.
Okay. Do you recall when that happened, and did your friends?
Yeah, it was in, let me see here, April 1942. I was an early draftee, and I recall a nice thing that happened to me, which my church family, different group families, got together with the preacher, and we had a little kind of a prayer session, if you choose to say so. And it was, I thought of it quite often. You see, it pleased my mother and dad, and I thought what they think of, you see, I'm not in their shoes.
Yeah.
And their thinking is considerably different than mine, for damn sure.
Yeah.
So you see, you didn't sit back and think what your parents were thinking, particularly because your mind wasn't particularly developed in that line quite yet.
Yeah.
And it was a spiritual thing.
Sure.
That you think of quite often. And that's kind of waning somewhat now in the country.
Yeah. So when you were drafted, they put you in the Army. Were you happy with that choice?
No.
Did you want to be something else?
I thought I should have. I thought I was a clothier. I should have been in the quartermaster, like a sore ass. You see. No, you see, they just looked you over and counted 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. What does he do? Well, he goes over there. Don't even look. You see.
You're going to the Army. You're going to the Navy. You're
right, exactly. You see, and your talents are just so they didn't care what you could do.
Didn't matter.
Didn't make any difference because you was going to do something different anyhow.
Yeah.
And there was damn few that were assigned to with their talent. Damn few. I had a friend that was a whiz in math in high school. Now, algebra, geometry, and all these advanced courses that were a pain for most people. He went through that like those salts. So this showed up on his entrance record, and in those days, they picked artillery officers on that strength because they had to figure out the firing fast.
Yeah.
So he was a lieutenant in a few short weeks, assigned to an artillery group, figuring out firing behaviors, you see, which was his talents is what they used. And damn few of them.
In that case, they used his talents.
Yeah, you see.
So was it tough for you to say goodbye to the parents, or were you often ready to go off?
No, it was toughish, you see.
Yeah.
And you know, our family, and someone recognized this with me one time, they says, Norwegians don't hug and squeeze. True. You know, and I shook hands, you see, with my folks.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't do that. But you see, I knew I'd make my mother feel sensitive about this, and myself too, so see ya.
Yeah. Okay. Where did you do your training at?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Oh.
You ever been there?
No, but I think one of my brothers were trained there in the 80s.
The first time, you see, we got chiggers.
Ah.
You don't have chiggers in South Dakota. And you just bit all over and you scratched yourself crazy, you see, because you slept out in the ground, you see, and you know, so you itched the hell and the chiggers ate you up. Forget it, just itch. Itch and bitch.
That's about it.
See?
And where did you receive your specialized training?
Oh, I love your word, specialized. Oh, that's a great word. Did you have to go to school to learn that word?
Yep.
You did?
Yeah, even graduated.
Excuse me, but see, it's a linguistic kind of a misnomer.
Okay.
You know? No, it was just let's see, now I got to dig one up here. It was varied.
Yeah.
Everything except cooking.
Okay.
No cooking. And some guys that cook should have been in my shoes digging holes.
Huh.
Oh, I'll tell you.
Do you remember some of the guys that you trained with from those days, or?
Yeah, I do. And you see, some had a riotous background.
Okay.
And it showed up when they got in a group, you see. And for the most part, it didn't fly too long. And I had an acquaintance one time, several of them, that had nervous breakdown. It was societal association with people they'd never been associated with. All of a sudden there's some guy that treated his friend just despicably, you see, and they says, we can't believe someone would do that, you see, and it was from one to the other, and they went home. They says, we can't use you. And you see, you say, oh no? Oh yeah. And it's a sad case because there weren't therapists in those early days to identify with this condition. Nowadays, you see, they, you know, they look at the guy and say, he's got not a problem, he just plays with his Peter. You know?
Sure.
Tell him to quit and he'll be okay.
How do you feel like you adapted to military life once you were in there? Did you get along?
Well, I was there for 45 months, so
yeah.
I had to get along.
Sure. All right, and we'll move into the. When did you? What theater of operations were you in?
In the Battle of the Bulge, the last go-around. Hitler lost 100,000 people. The Allies lost 19,000, which was too many. One was too many.
Yeah.
But Hitler lost 100,000. Just think of that. You see.
Mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You see. And American cemeteries are awesome. And for some strange reason, I can't explain even to myself, I would like to have visited the Normandy Cemetery, where there's 5,000 graves. And what attracted me, what attracts me to think like that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's the respect for those that are there, and I'm home.
Oh yeah, it's a powerful place to be.
Powerful place.
Yeah. Going back a little bit, where did you embark from, and how was the trip over?
Oh, it took 10 days on an old luxury liner. My boss, who ran this clothing store down there, whom I worked for, great people, just great people, had a bunch of stuff on the desk one day, and I walked up to talk to him, and he had a picture there. He says, Helen, his wife, he says, we went to Paris on that boat for our honeymoon. And I says, that's the boat that took us overseas. It took 10 days.
Was it the QE2?
Aquitania. It was a luxury, been scrapped for years, you see. But it was put into service, bunks, you see, and evidently was fast enough, you see.
Oh, sure.
And one night I went out on deck because that hold was full of smoke. You imagine a bunch of guys all smoking. It's funny, a lot of people didn't die from asphyxiation.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I went up on deck, you see, for some fresh air, and all of a sudden I thought, this thing is going this direction here. And they were making a changing course, you see, even though it wasn't even though the submarines were gone, they had captured them or blown them all up, you see, but it took many years.
I heard that they would sail in a zigzag to make it harder.
Right, zigzag, you see.
Where did you arrive at in Europe?
In Gourock, Scotland.
Ah.
Gourock, Scotland. Gourock.
What was that like?
It was get on the train and go to Tenby, Wales. All night. And so you sleep? No, we played cards all the way until you couldn't stay awake, you see. Tenby was a resort for royalty in days gone by.
Okay.
It was in the southern tip of Wales. The southern tip was a castle submerged to about 8-10 foot at high tide. And we took time out to go through it, you see. It was a nostalgic trip, you see. It wasn't on the historic register, it was just in ruin.
Oh, okay.
And it was a provocative experience, you see, among many others. And I take liberties with the word provocative there. You see, and I learned that watching TV.
Yeah.
And you had to go to school. What a kick in the ass.
Yeah. All right. So where'd you go from there?
Gourock, Scotland.
Yeah.
The natives had a dialect that they talked supposedly English, you see, but they had a dialect that you had a hell of a time getting a hold of it. There weren't many there either, but there was a museum there that identified with William the Conqueror.
Oh.
And I was kind of a history nut.
Okay.
And of course, I was interested and entertained highly, you see. And the access, when high tide was, there was no access.
Oh, wow.
These people, thousands of years ago, you say, where are all the dummies gone? Brilliance prevailed, some corner here and there. But there was no access at high tide unless you wanted to drown.
Right.
And then you see in the Rhine River was a boundary line for royalty somehow, and I can't go into that, but there were many ancient castles there.
Oh.
And going back that far, you see, 1,000 years.
Yeah.
You see, it's mind-boggling. You say it's hard to believe this crap, you see.
Did you get to see some of those?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And the thing that was quite interesting was Napoleon's tomb. Now, you see, Napoleon was a part of the language, but a French son of a bitch.
Yeah.
You see, but he was revered for his talents, you see. And he is interred in a area, their whole family, Bonaparte's.
Oh.
I stood in this enclosure, it was a little kind of a stall. And I recall standing there and reminiscing because when Life magazine was on the market, you may recall it, picture magazine basically, on the front page was a picture of Hitler standing in this spot. And I thought, because of that bastard I'm here, you see, and I'm standing where he stood and he's on the loose and we're after him, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the sarcophagus was imported from Finland. It's a red stone that's highly unusual. A massive sarcophagus, you see.
Interesting.
And you see, it's a tourist trap. Not a trap, but a tourist destination. If you go to Paris and you miss it, why you miss something, because it's heck of a thing to say, but it's an attraction, you see. And my best answer is no. You see, because you really weren't aware, particularly, there was too many other things that attracted your thinking.
Yeah.
And that's why when I went to the museums, they attracted my attention because it was, they are very interesting.
Right. And you were there, so if you had the chance, you might as well check it out.
And you see, it's been 85 years.
Yeah.
And things, look at things that changed in those years in that area.
For history buff type things, what do you suppose was your favorite spot that you saw historically when you were over there?
Oh, there were so many.
Yeah.
You see, it was general devastation that kind of made an imprint on your mind because it was from a house to a pile. And there's a story, a short biography about George Marshall. George Marshall was recognized easily as a forgotten general. He really never got an assignment particularly, but he says, we've got to rebuild Germany, and rebuild we did. And with George Marshall's intelligence, because he was a smart cookie.
So what were your first orders once you got over there and got settled in? What was your first order of business?
Get a hold of this, lift this, hold this, do it. It was manual direction.
Okay.
Manual direction.
Sure.
See?
And can you tell us about what was the first time when you first experienced combat?
Oh, I didn't shoot any of them. I didn't wrestle any of them to the ground. But you see, the French were way behind in military talent, basically.
Okay.
So we were crammed into World War I boxcars called 40-8s. 40 men or 8 mules. In World War I, they used the boxcars to haul 8 mules to the front, you see, for general motivation, and 40 men to squeeze them in there. And so it went.
So you were in on that.
Yeah, you see, and there's many troops did experience the 40-8s to get up to Area A, whatever you wanted to call it.
That was their line, the front.
Yeah, see, the responsible area that was.
Do you remember some of the guys that you served with and over there? Did you keep in touch with them afterwards or anything like that?
Not really, but I remember some of them.
Yeah.
I remember this one guy, we called him Gabby because he was a tune. He never said nothing.
Huh.
He could be on fire and he'd hardly say anything. Huh. Except when he got full of booze. Look out. Well, yeah. One time we were in this town after the war, and there was a town that packaged champagne. Yeah. So they invited all the troops down to the factory to imbibe. So you didn't take a little shot glass, you took your mess cup, which held about a quart, you see. And so dangerous, but very, very well received, you see, because every dog face was looking for something to drink. Yeah. Hell of a thing. Besides, you see, what are you looking for? Broads or drinks? Well, anyhow, he got too much, and he was sick the next morning. I says, get up, get up, get up. Oh, he said, go to hell. He said, and he was sicker than a dog, see? I says, we still had a responsibility. We had to be down front, hangover or not. Well, he wasn't even in the hangover stage, you see. So he got up and I says, besides that, I says, I think you've crapped in your pants. Oh no, he says, no. He says, get out of here. Well, as I walk down the hall in this shack, he says, oh, yes. that is other than getting shot, the crap in your pants is bad,
That's the worst thing.
There aren't any nice, luxurious bathrooms to clean up or clean
Yeah.
And then he'd talk. And he'd talk, you see. But then as soon as the hangover wore, he was quiet. And one time, I thought, I don't know, I visit with him, and, he was done his good worker, done his share of the work or more.
Yeah.
He says, Solheim, I'm going to go to church with you today. I says, fine. I didn't ask him which one or where. I just says, okay, I'm going down there in a few minutes. And he didn't say anything during the time before or after, and I thought, well, I'm sure that his mind has absorbed a spiritual feeling, you see. And I'm sure it did. And where he is today, Lord knows. Most of these people are gone because they'd all be 100 years old right at it, you see.
How did that work with the services? Do they just gather in little areas? Or
yeah, a particular faith would be identified in a particular area, you see. And yeah.
I suppose anywhere you could find space, in an outside or in a building.
And you see, a chaplain was up front. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And they took their bars off. They just put a lesser identity there, and sometimes the chaplain was hustling along there, and you say, I wonder who this guy, and he was the chaplain, you see.
Oh, okay.
A highly responsible job. And what do you say in a difficult time? I don't know. But this is his talent, see?
Yeah.
Was saying the right thing at the right time, if there was such a behavior.
Yeah.
And the odds were there wasn't.
Sure. I suppose they tried to bring some amount of comfort.
One time, my friend, Christmas Eve, they had church services in this area. There was no such thing as any roofs. They were gone, a long time. So he came back with me. He says, the general was at church, and he says, I saw him cry. I says, I can understand that somewhat, you see. Mm-hmm. Most people in the upper echelons of responsibility were World War I field officers, you see. Mm-hmm. So they had in the field experience.
Yeah.
There weren't no rookies out there.
Right.
No. And he says he cried.
Sure.
And you see, when you see, it's mind shaky when you see the general cry.
Right from the top.
Yeah.
So were you involved in the invasion on D-Day?
No.
Normandy? Did you come in after that?
After, yeah.
But did you go from England to France, or how did you?
Yeah. And you see, history recognizes that Hitler knew the jig was up. So he thought if he could get to Antwerp, any way he could get there, he could divide the Allies and sue for peace to an advantage. Well, it didn't work, you see, because things didn't work out for him that well. The weather changed, and the tanks that were going to be back-to-back didn't appear, and the sky clouded over, and the planes were on the ground in England. On Christmas Day, the sky cleared. it was airplanes full of sky all day long, you see.
Yeah.
And we looked at one another and we says, the show is coming to a close. Which was true.
Yeah.
And the weather cooperated. See, it cleared up and it was clear, and there was planes and bombers as far as you could see.
So you marched across Europe then from France towards Belgium?
Well, you took the trucks and you didn't walk.
It wasn't literally walking.
No, you see.
You were on troop transport trucks and things
Troop
like
transports, you see, yeah, because there was no tracks, they were gone. So, it's all those people that went through hell, tons of them. And there was a displaced persons camp. 100,000 displaced persons. It's a lot of people living like dogs.
Yeah.
And in rags. And you had to take care of them. Let them loose.
Sure.
Feed them. Clean them up. Delouse them. By the thousands. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
That anybody could do anything to people like that, you see, but it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed, unfortunately.
No, you were involved in the Battle of the Bulge.
I was on guard duty there, you see.
There, okay.
And there was a lot of blacks that drove vehicles.
Yeah.
And the boys from the south, from New Orleans, when they says halt, they done like this. Because you see, they had a grudge on the blacks in those days. And so he drove the truck. Am I sure of this? And I thought, I don't believe what he's going to do. He's going to shoot one of them drivers. And they didn't, but it changed, you see.
Yeah.
And long come integration, you see, and it's the way it is, and the way it probably should be.
That was the Red Ball Express, they called that.
Yeah.
Truck drivers supplying the front lines. Right? Okay.
And you see, the black boys, most of them never drove a vehicle in their time. And I'm telling you, when they got behind that steering wheel, that baby cranked.
Those are some big trucks, I imagine.
Oh yeah, they cranked them on the floor, you see, because they roared and they...
Did you see the enemy when you were during the Battle of the Bulge?
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Most of them were dead.
Yeah.
In truckloads.
Okay.
Pick up the graves registration. How that worked, I never did learn, and I'm glad I didn't, because. But every once in a while there'd be a truck with truckload of frozen bodies. Pick them up, take them back, bury them. Frozen, all grotesque positions.
Yeah.
Some arms, legs, throw them in the truck. So a person can say he's seen more than he bargained for.
You're right.
And it ain't nothing you ring up in your time, because you forget it. Hopefully you want to forget it, you see, and don't. Because there's too many people that have paid a terrible price.
Right.
And so you back off.
Yeah.
The off-color stories that
Yeah.
don't hurt anybody.
That's what I was going to say. During your when you were on the move and there was downtime, what kind of, did you play cards or what did you do when you were waiting around for stuff?
Well, find something to burn. In Belgium, you see, you crawl into, the troops crawled into wherever and found whatever to burn. And this is what you done.
To keep warm?
To stay warm,
Yeah.
you see.
It was so cold.
And which didn't work very good, but this is what you done. And
From what I've read, it was the coldest winter in
coldest
recorded
winter
history.
recorded.
Yeah, maybe it still is. I don't know. I haven't heard, but at the time it was.
See, and it was hard to believe.
So after the bulge, did you keep on moving towards Germany, or what happened after that?
Yeah. We did. Yeah, we moved in there and stayed wherever, you see, and and it was. You see, as the skies cleared, and the Krauts were on the run. And the Allies fast after them.
Sure. Did you come across any of the concentration camps? Did you go that far?
No, I didn't go that far, you see.
Yeah.
Seeing the starved people was enough.
Right.
And you see this is a terrible story, you see, and it's just as real as the sun comes up.
So, at some point, you got word, or did you have points that you were able to get back home, or how did that part work?
Yeah. And if you had so many points, you were scheduled to leave at a so-and-so time, you see, yeah.
Did you have yours by then, or were you thinking?
Yeah, I had enough, so I was,
You wouldn't have to go to the Pacific.
to the rest, or no, right. I had several friends that did, you see, and I thought, ooh. But then when Harry says, it ain't gonna happen, boys, they were happy in a minute, you see, because he says, we ain't going.
Yeah. How did you feel about the bombs? Were you
Elated.
Yeah. 100% of the veterans I've talked to give that same exact answer.
Absolutely elated, he says.
You would have been on your way to the Pacific otherwise.
Exactly,
Yeah.
see? Exactly.
I knew a guy that was fought similar to, he was D-Day plus 20, and he went through the bulge and the whole thing, and he got when it was done, he was assigned to go to the Pacific. He sent home for a week, but while he was home, that happened and he didn't have to go. But he was that close.
Yeah.
After doing the whole European thing.
Now, can you imagine having to make that decision? It's probably the biggest decision you ever made in your life.
Yeah.
Without a question.
Yeah.
And how right are you? How wrong are you?
Yeah.
Where are you at? Well, you see, it was right, because saving thousands of lives was the name of the game.
Well, yeah, they estimated it. There would have been millions, millions more killed if it had happened, a war over there in the mainland. But, did you ever get to see a USO show when you were over there?
Oh yeah.
What was that like?
No, I never got to see a USO show. I orchestrated that answer.
Oh, okay. You didn't have that kind of luxury, huh?
No, I didn't get
No Bob Hope for you.
No, that didn't happen. No.
Okay.
There weren't any. There weren't any that I recall.
Oh, sure.
I'd recall them, but it seems to me there was some USA BIMS one time that was with the Red Cross. They had donuts or something, and I don't know.
Okay.
See.
So, let's see, I'm just skipping over some. We answered some of these questions already. So then you returned home, and then what was the first thing you did when you came home?
One of the first things is I married my fiance. We were married January, I should remember that day, I believe it was the 26th. And she came to Redfield, South Dakota with nothing.
You got married right here in town?
In Missouri.
Oh, in Missouri, okay.
And I had a job, see, with the miserable JCPenney people.
Yeah.
Nice people, but you see, corporate thinking is different.
Yeah.
You, if anybody can stifle your thinking process, they're going to do it. And make you a kind of a dog, you see. Well, that's not living.
Right.
You got to live a little.
Yep.
You know, and you got to make a few mistakes.
Yep.
I've made my share of mistakes.
So what was your wife's name?
She was from a German family, Elma Sarhage. Sarhage, a real kraut name. When I called her, I says, grab a pencil. I says, you'll never get it right.
Now, did you get engaged before you went over?
Yep.
Okay, how did you meet her?
In church.
Ah.
I had a friend, we were out on the town. And chances are we were hung over, the odds were. We were kind of hung a little, and I says, Carl Kolstad, a friend of mine, gone. I says, let's quit this crap. And so we went to church, Carl and I. And ahead of me was a friend with two girls. Two nice looking girls. And I looked them over, you know. After all, I sat right behind them.
Yeah.
I says, he's got one extra. And I says, I'm going to look her over. And I did. And we were married for 28 years.
Nice.
And she died of cancer. And lymphatic cancer, which is treatable now. In her time, in 1974, the treatment was kind of foreign. And
so you got married, and then what did you do? Did you keep on working at Penny's? Or
worked until 1950.
At Penny's?
And then I went across the street here, where the Legion is. That was a clothing store, an early days clothing store, and it was known as Friedman's. Now that wasn't a Norwegian store.
Oh.
And he was a country Jewish boy.
Yeah.
There's a difference. They're smart enough to know that you acclimate yourself, you see, and don't ride the high part of the horse, you see.
Yeah.
And he made a ton of friends. Sold the store to his partner for $1 in 1929 and went back to Chicago. In Chicago, he got kind of back in business. Mama was a fashion retailer in the Marshall Field building upstairs, 8-10 stories up, and I thought, what a place. But what I learned, she catered to the black customers. And she got, I imagine, rich, so she got something Mrs. Washington liked. She'd call her on the phone and come down, and you see, it was communication that worked for her.
Nice.
And they've been gone for years, but anyhow.
You worked at their store here in town.
Not for him, because he retired, but I worked as a clothier in there, you see. And I'm an old rag peddler, you see, and enjoyed it for the most part. Tough days, like in most any kind of business. And then we went across the street, in that we had put up a building there, next door to the bakery, and my wife of the time, we run it.
Oh.
And of course I had several girls that helped. They're good help.
Yeah.
Secret of the thing.
Oh.
And it flew. And we had associates, partners, not really. See, we just kind of shook. I don't think we even shook hands on anything. We says, here's what you do. If there's $3 left in the middle of January, we each get $1. And you see, it was what you done.
Yeah.
You didn't jack yourself around with a lot of happy horse shit, you see. And these people were good people. You knew what they were made of. And you just done what you done. Here was the bank president. This was his office.
Yeah.
I'd sit in the chair where the bank president sat and sweat over there when I wanted to borrow money, you see. Mm-hmm. Now, some businesses thrive on borrowed money. Nowadays, most all of them do. If they can't survive somehow on borrowed money, it's a problem. Mm-hmm. So the rag business had a terrible appetite for cash. And when you paid your loans off and you made another loan the same day, why, you see, you got along fine. And if there was $1 you thought you could take, you put in your pocket, which wasn't that many, but you know, you bought a few beers and you say, this is fine, I'm with a nice bunch of people, big fat ass difference. Mm-hmm. And the treatment was just terrific, very good, you see, and they just let my wife and I take off, just go. And you see, it was unusual. You're not the judge. You're not playing judge. You're a salesman.
Sure.
There's a difference.
Well, we better wrap this up now.
You know, it's probably summertime, and I don't know what in the hell you're going to do with this crap here, I call it, you see, but it's all true.
Yeah.
And
well,
you see,
I think it's important for your kids and grandkids and people that want to watch it, and us too, to learn about
well, this
stuff.
is what I've told myself when I finally denied reluctance and says, I'm going to do this, because somebody should really, people should really know how it really went, you see. Mm-hmm. And it isn't who done what, or who had a nice cushy job and this kind of bullshit, you see, because there weren't many of them, such a thing. And it was kind of do what you do. And
is there anything about your World War II experience that you're thinking of that we didn't cover that you want to say something about?
Oh, kids ask me questions once in a while and I gotta scratch my head.
That was my next question. Is there anything that you'd want to say to your kids or grandkids that then they're watching this down the road about your experience?
Well, what I'd like to tell them is get involved. Because you see, it's uncomfortable many times, but you got to run for this or run for that, you see. You got to get involved in your, more so now than ever, local political feeling. It don't have to be truly political, but it's got to be involvement, you see. Mm-hmm. And in our time, there was a dozen of us or more that kind of camped together and drank together and put things together and says, let's do this or that, and had a little fun doing it, you see. The Gamble Man, rest his soul, and the Penny Man, him too, Ben Franklin Man and myself, 17th of May was Norwegian's Independence Day. So our dad spoke of that quite often, you see, in easy terms, you see. And it was the day when Norway abandoned the sponsorship of Sweden, you see, and they were independent. Okay. Anyhow, it was an occasion to have a few drinks. Anyhow, we got together to see, we weren't associated. We says, let's have a little 17th of May kind of a thing. We'll figure out something. So we sat around and, you know, like we're doing here, and maybe with a couple of beers and says, let's do this or that. So we bought a little advertising. We put something together, you see, and had a 17th of May observance in the paper, you see. So this couple of weeks ago here, the son of he says, we're going to have a 17th of May kind of a thing in the back end of the store. So they had a coffee and cake and a BS, you see.
Yeah.
And reminiscent of when his dad and we had the 17th of May, unrelated to business, but we says, let's do something. Sure. You see, let's just do something.
Yeah.
So we can have a little fun, if not anything else. Did we take in extra money? Doubtful. But but the important thing was, we done something together.
Yeah.
And you see, in a small town, very important. And one time some guy says to me, he says, John, he evidently was on bad terms in his town. He says, how do you get along in your town? You know, in the store, he had a corporate store too, as a competitor. Well, I thought, well, I says, I'll tell you what we do is what we shouldn't do. We go out and get drunk together.
Yeah.
And I says, the word together is the motivating thing. I says, and other than that, I says, it's just kind of happy horse manure.
Yeah.
But you see, quite often I'd listen to different people in a group. You know, like 6 or 8 people, and my job, or what I thought was my work, was to listen and kind of encourage conversation.
Yeah.
And the important thing with many of them that were getting along quite well was their talent for communication. Not big, not fancy, just hello.
Yeah.
And they were the guys that were getting along the best, you see. And the growlers spent all their time growling. And worked with a glass that was half empty, you see. I says, yeah. There's your problem. I says, you talk to that half empty glass too many times. And making these friends, you see, they all lent something. Someone does something that you don't do.
Yeah.
So you say, I wonder what, I'm doing all these things, that's proper. I wonder what so-and-so is doing. So you say, what are you doing with whatever? And he'd tell you easily. And it was kind of the name of the game, which quite often don't prevail nowadays. Because exposure is curtailed and limited and restrained somehow, you see. And we talk about the comma, you see.
Yeah.
And you see, we didn't pay any attention to trivial things. You overlooked it or you forgot it. You didn't know it existed, and all of a sudden you were in the middle of an affair that says,
Yeah.
So you see, well, I apologize for talking too much.
No, it's perfect. Well, thanks for I want to thank you for your service and for your time today.
Because that's been your life, talking to people, you see.
Yeah.
And without it, you wouldn't have made it. So it hangs on.
Yeah.
It hangs around. And then you see, that's how you learn Norwegian or Swedish. When Pa and his neighbor got together and they smiled and used some strange language, you say, I wonder if that's the thing? Sure, it's the thing.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, John. It's really interesting to hear your story.
All right. Well.